An earthquake hit Israel on Wednesday. Probably none of you heard about it from any Israeli friends or family that you have. It was a 4.5 on the Richter scale. Just a small news item I caught in some of the Israeli press I read, and must have been even smaller in some of the other, since I missed it. Israel sits on a major fault line, so it's actually never surprising when there is an earthquake in Israel. To put it in some context for those of us who have not lived in California, a 4.7 earthquake hit about 100 miles off the coast of Ocean City in January, and most of us didn't hear about that either. The Mid-Atlantic earthquake that many of you may remember from 2011 was 5.7 on the Richter scale. And again, for those of us who have not lived in California, 4.7 to 5.7 is much larger a change on that scale than it might seem to our simple minds. A far stronger earthquake than 4.5 or 5.7 has been hitting the United States. The fault line runs deep. It precedes the current administration. And it was Alabama shaking this week when I penned these words, but Missouri jumped in at the end of the week hard as well. The challenge to abortion rights in this country is not new, but we should feel the ground shaking at this moment. I have been discussing this issue since before I arrived here, but since my arrival, the reproductive rights disaster has become even more serious this year. Alabama's governor has signed the Alabama Human Life Protection Act this week after it passed the state legislature. This law doesn't allow for exceptions for rape or incest. A very narrow exception or two regarding the life of the mother did stand. On the whole, the law asserts government control over a woman's right to her body and criminalizes medical treatment provided by doctors. And as I said, this southern state's action is only the latest in the ongoing quake. The Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism offers the following, and it is a week out of date, though I have changed it a bit. 2019 seems to be a turning point in anti-choice legislation. This past March, Mississippi and Kentucky governors signed bills into law. Ohio just became the 5th state overall and the 3rd in 2019 alone to enact such a ban. 6 week bans have also been filed or are actively pending in one or both chambers of state legislatures in Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, Minnesota, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia, just to name a few. As we know, Georgia signed its bill just recently as well. Furthermore, Texas, where they like to do things big, has presented House Bill 896, which would make abortion a capital murder offense for both the patient and provider, regardless of any contrary federal law, executive order, or court decision. Despite the seemingly obvious hypocrisy of a bill that carries the possibility of a death penalty as punishment on this issue, House Bill 897 currently sits in the Senate, Texas House Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committee, awaiting further action. 6 states, Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota, and South Dakota, have successfully passed trigger laws that would criminalize abortion if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned or heavily gutted. 8 other states have introduced similar bills this legislative season that are contingent on Roe's assumed or hoped for demise. And while Maryland news this week may have been filled with news of government officials responding to Alabama's position in one way or another, preparing for such a wave, let's remember that this past session there was legislation introduced into our legislature that would have further limited abortion rights. Quite a legislative review, I know, to drop in the middle of a sermon, but please accept how summary my comments actually have been on the range of legal action and the details of each of these bills and laws. True, Roe v. Wade is still the law of the land, but let us not be complacent. These efforts are a wave of attempts to push the federal courts and ultimately the Supreme Court to weaken or even overturn that crucial 1973 decision. I must admit I find myself on interesting homiletical ground when the Reverend Pat Robertson is arguing my point regarding Alabama. I didn't see it any more than I saw this week's episode of Grey's Anatomy, but apparently Pat Robertson said on one of the most recent 700 Club episodes, "I think Alabama has gone too far. It's an extreme law and they want to challenge Roe v. Wade. God bless them. They're trying to do something, but I don't think that's the case I'd want to bring to the Supreme Court." So I was a little coy. I think Robertson and I have different views and positions on Roe v. Wade. He's really talking strategically or actually tactically. But does he understand the extreme nature of this particular law in Alabama? Clearly. That doesn't mean that the anti-reproductive rights activists will back down on trying to limit women's lives or in trying to foist upon us their understanding of when life begins. And again, I am only being summary without getting into the details of their misrepresentations of specific medical procedures or the range of theological views. My point is that we can't sit complacently and think that this earthquake doesn't impact us or our state. It shakes all of America, and our concern must be beyond our own lives and families, our own city and state. Furthermore, when I review the list today of those states passing some of the most restrictive laws regarding reproductive rights, I'm aware of the connections between these states and our families and friends. Not some of the ones that passed the trigger laws, but some of the ones that have passed the bans, all of them, I believe, are places where we actually have college students from the congregation currently studying or recently having studied. Most of these states are also places where members of this congregation, especially a congregation of our size and diversity, have family and friends living and working. Georgia, Texas, Ohio. We had a college student just come home from his first year at Alabama. Each one of these states is directly connected to us. As my family knows all too well, you can evacuate from a hurricane. You don't get the chance to evacuate from an earthquake. If the quake is nationwide, you can't even choose a safer place to live. As Rabbi Joe Black, in the words that Cantor Ellerin just sang, quotes Leviticus, "It is not upon us to stand idly by." We should feel the connections, be they human, national, family, or communal. Some congregants and I are attending the Religious Action Center's consultation this coming week. I assume this issue will be on the docket. Regardless of our age or gender, regardless of our current or future reproductive reality, we should be concerned about the shaking of our constitutionally protected reproductive rights of those in our families and our loved ones, and even more so those whose resources may not be the same as so many members of this congregation. This quake isn't off the coast. It isn't low on the Richter scale. It's real and growing, and we should be alert and active. Dare I say, Shabbat Shalom.